Opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Now, I know last week I told you that we thought we were going to be live from the Fresno card office. We are not live from the Fresno card office, although I just was with them on a Skype call. But they were moving, and so we decided to push that back, and we will go there another time. But what a lovely, lovely office that is, and they have a brand new, I got to see part of it on the feed, and it's a lovely new office. And instead, we're here live in our regular home, so that's very comfy for me, and it is Wednesday, and we do have Dr. Graham Pichet here with us live. So Traven is showing you some of the different ways that you can connect here with us. We're so proud of the fact that we're coming to you on more screens and in more ways that you can watch it. They just told us over at BronxNet TV that they're going to move our time. So we're moving to prime time over on BronxNet. I believe we're going to be in prime time on Tuesday nights starting next week. We'll let you know more about that information, but also check us out in one of our newer places on iHeartRadio. I do want to tell you that if you go to our homepage, autism-live.com right now, that our live chat is open. I have it open, and you guys can be writing in your comments completely anonymously, completely free right now. You can write it in the other places as well, and we'll be monitoring those as well. But what's nice about the live feature is that nobody gets to see your comment. If you're commenting on Facebook or YouTube, people can at least see whatever name that you've put there, right? And sometimes you want to be able to ask a question and not have the world see that you're asking the question, right? So looking forward, although now I've helped myself out so that I have the show playing live on my thing. That's good. In any case, that's how much I've helped myself out there. That's why I don't normally have that up at the top of the show. Okay, but we're thrilled to be here with you. We are going to be with you live for the next hour. Dr. Graham Pichet is going to be answering your questions. You can be writing those in right now. We do have some that were submitted ahead of time. And already I see that somebody has written in and said, yes, I love having Dr. Doreen live. We do too. So my friends, let's not waste any time. It's time for Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet is
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Graham-Pichet.
Dr. Graham-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have with us the fabulous Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet. For those of you who don't know, first of all, I'm her biggest fan, and I know that some of you would like to, wrestle me for that title because you have lots of fans.
Oh, that's so nice.
But today I'm saying I get to hold the biggest fan title because she's a remarkable person. She founded CARD, also founded Autism Care Today, has been making a difference for more than how many years? I mean, it's embarrassing to me to say
40
years. Like it doesn't even want to come out of my mouth because nobody would believe that. You don't even look 40 years old, so it's like, how can you?
Thank you.
Does she? I mean, tell me if I'm crazy. You don't. So has been helping individuals on the spectrum from very young babies up through senior citizens. I always say that I consider her the preeminent expert in the field of autism. She also, one of the many things that I love about her is that she sees individuals on the spectrum as whole people, as you should,
course.
as everyone should, but we know that that runs short when people have letters after their name because they look at the symptoms instead of the person. She sees that individual as a whole person and then looks at the people around that person as part of the whole of what's happening for that person. And that she's a true visionary, that she's able to see around corners and know what's happening with the
Thank you.
autism community and things that we will need next. And thank you. Are you kidding me? Thank you for all that you have done over the years and all you
Thank you
continue
so
to
much.
do.
It's a pleasure being involved with the wonderful families of kids with autism, honestly.
Honestly.
It's been an incredible journey.
One of the first things that got said to me was Logan Shepard's dad said to me, "Welcome to the club that you never thought you wanted to belong to, but once you get here, you're going to see that it's filled with really amazing people."
Oh, what a nice thing to say.
And that has never been, anything but the truth. So,
It's a great thing to say.
What a great thing to say. Dr. Doreen is going to answer your questions live here on the show, but little disclaimer that there is no expert in any field that could answer individual specific questions in this format. So just know that you're going to write in your question and be as specific as possible. Please let us know what the closest major city is to you so that we can figure out what resources might be available to you. But know that she's going to answer your question in a general nature based on what you've said, to help you to be able to go back to the experts who are close to you and have eyes on you or that individual to help you to do what you need to do. I have wanted all this week. So many people have written in and said so many wonderful things.
Oh, nice.
And how much this, because we hadn't had you for a while. And everybody got
Yeah,
all
it was
excited
nice
when
to
you were
come
back
back,
last
yes.
week. Okay, so I just want to address this first because we have a lot of people out there that are trying to get their kids diagnosed, and it can be a little bit of a
It's
kerfuffle.
difficult, yes.
Yeah. So somebody wrote in and said, "Good morning. We're trying to get an autism evaluation for a 10-year-old. Insurance is, they gave what their specific thing is. I don't know that I'm going to share that. And any help you could provide would be appreciated." They gave us their phone number and their email. But in general, for people who are trying to get their kids diagnosed right now, what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's depending on where you are, and I see the area code for this person, and I think they're in California. So I think, it's not that difficult to get a diagnosis in California. Some states, it's extremely difficult, and you have to wait for months and months to get someone who can actually see your child and diagnose. But basically, all you have to do is you have to find a doctor who can diagnose. So you'll be looking for. You should contact your insurance first and say, "I'm looking for an autism specialist who can diagnose." That's not going to be a BCBA. It's going to be either a licensed psychologist or a psychiatrist, a developmental pediatrician. Those are basically the three people or three categories that would have had training in diagnosis of autism. There are many others. Your physician, any of your MDs can diagnose as well, but if you want a really comprehensive diagnosis, you probably want to see one of those three categories. And then you just ask your payer, your insurance company, to give you some names, and you call them up and get on their calendar. And that's really as simple as it is.
And it's one of those things. I think you got to keep, like, the first person you call may say no, and you got to keep moving forward.
You have to push forward, that's right. And the thing that worries me, Shannon, is that there are some states where kids are still being put on hold for 6 months, and that's just crazy. It's just crazy,
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when there was a period of time in one place in California where the waiting list was 2 years. And I know that when you found out about that, you said this is crazy, and then you made yourself available so that you could diagnose a bunch of kids.
Yeah,
in
we
that area.
actually formed a psychometrics company so that we could do testing and diagnose kids all the time. There are states, however, like Michigan, for instance, where you basically don't have that sort of thing going on and families are stuck. If you're in a state, anyone listening, where you have a long wait list if you want to get a diagnosis, I would really just drive to another state and try to get the diagnosis. It really doesn't matter where you get the diagnosis. any physician, any psychologist from any state's diagnosis will work for your insurance company.
Okay, we had somebody who just wrote in on the live feature, and I'm really tuned into that today. I have a question for Dr. Doreen. First, I would like to thank you for the tremendous wealth of information that you have provided. My question is, I have a 9-year-old autistic son who is highly verbal. He loves singing and music. He has perfect pitch and memorizes songs like crazy. The problem is he does not know how to monitor when he should be singing or how loud he sings. He sings in class, during classroom lectures, when he is playing with his friends on the playground, in the doctor's office, etc. He is unable to know when it's socially appropriate to sing. His friends sometimes think he's strange to be singing, and when they get annoyed by it, he doesn't read their social cues whatsoever. What's a good way of helping him with this? Could singing be a form of self-stimulatory behavior?
Oh, that's a great question too. So now I have so many things to tell you.
But again, I believe 9-year-old, because I know
Yeah.
that's always the first thing you like to know.
So just taking notes because there's 3 different things I want to tell you. So it could be a self-stimulatory behavior. Some of our kids really enjoy kind of various sounds and you know, I think I go back to like the 70s when a lot of our kids used to do this type of thing, and we were trying to figure out what that is. And again, it was the same thing. It was trying to like play with sound. It could be, but for this period, like for now, let's just consider it an enjoyable activity that your child likes to do, right? And it's totally a good activity, and it's perfectly fine. And actually, I would really suggest that you nurture it too. We don't want to eliminate it. We just want to eliminate it in certain environments. And that's super important because as your child ages, you're always going to want to have rewarding, reinforcing activities that your child can engage in. So let's make sure that all you want to do right now is you just want to give your child a set of rules that say these environments you cannot sing, period. And you don't have to worry about the explanation. That's a little bit later. That whole social cue thing we'll get to in a minute. For now, you just need to get your child to not sing in environments that are going to like make other kids look at him in a strange way or just are inappropriate or whatever, stigmatizing environments, right? So perhaps that would be in certain school situations, in public, and whatever it is. But make sure that however you get this rule, see, in the beginning, what we do is we give our kids, we try to teach them what's called rule-governed behavior because it's a lot easier than socially interpreted behavior. So you just give them a series of rules. Here you can sing, here you cannot sing. That and you want to give that to your child. I don't know what his level of functioning is, but if you can actually like write out a list so that he can read and say, is this an environment? No. Or is this an environment? Yes. And it's just that clear. Okay, so that is dealt with. The next thing is now teaching your child why certain environments are inappropriate, right? Socially inappropriate. And there's lots of different things you can do with that. It's a much harder process. And Shannon, as you know, we have a whole section in skills. Skills is the curriculum that we've written over the many, many years. And there's a whole section on social cognition. And this has to do with, it's not just social behavior, it's the ability to read other people's thoughts about us. It's to be able to interpret how people see us, right? So for example, if he's singing and a group of kids start to laugh, he might not be able to interpret that as, oh, they're thinking this is a little bit odd. He might think they think it's funny and they're joining me. Like he might completely misunderstand what they're doing, right? And so it would be important for him to start to learn what's called theory of mind and being able to see other people's perspective. But that is not something that you can teach overnight. Honestly, it's a series. It's a very long series of lessons and things that will teach the child to begin to interpret things differently. Now think about theory of mind. It's not just that people see things differently than we do. It therefore influences that, you know, the thought pattern that people believe in things differently. People have different preferences. People have different feelings than we do, all of that. So we've written all of these kinds of things in a particular order. It's in the skills curriculum. I really recommend you take a look at it there, just because it's like I couldn't name all the lessons. I would love to, but it's about 100 different consecutive things, you know, that you start with just reading another person's facial expression, and then getting to the point of understanding how what you did would have possibly influenced their feelings, then getting to the point of understanding how you might perceive an environment a certain way or a thing a certain way, and someone else will be the exact opposite. It just goes on and on and on, and it's a pretty complicated series of lessons. So until your child has a really detailed understanding of theory of mind and perspective taking, it's going to be very difficult for the child to understand social appropriateness of various behaviors. One of the things I do want to tell you is, as you develop this whole thing and get to the point where your child has some understanding that, people think differently than I do, that's the whole core of theory of mind, then you can also videotape scenarios like your child singing, other people looking, and so you can even do a mock scenario. You can set it up, and that's what we do with our therapists. And then you sit with the child, show the video, and go through it and say, what do you think they're thinking? Do you think they like your singing? Do you think it's bothering them? There's a lot of different things you can do, but I would suggest that you right now first do a set of rules so that your child is stopping doing those, you know, singing in environments that are not appropriate, and then just literally go through the social cognition curriculum and go step by step. I promise you, it won't just help this thing, it'll help a million different types of behaviors that your child might be showing.
Yeah, I would just add to it, because you're so brilliant and you've been doing this for so long, you forget all the little things that you do.
Steps.
That it, you know, that the rule thing works with our kids. It really, really works. But there's a bunch of little things that we have to do. We can't just say, here's the rule now you follow it. We need to help them with the rule, and sometimes distract them when they're, you know, and say, hey, we're doing this instead, and then reward them when they're not doing it.
Right.
There's a little bit of finesse to it, but if you want to learn how to do all that, that's all available for you at ibehavioraltraining.com. Easy trainings that you can do that are really inexpensive. I always like to recommend that people start with the compliance one. I know that isn't necessarily what the folks at IBT like people to start with, but I think when people see the compliance one and they go, oh, like there's a click, and then you want to do the rest of them.
It's true, but they're all valuable.
They
are.
Know,
like sometimes I feel like we're you know, when a question is this complex.
Yeah.
And the best way I can answer it is just to say, go look at skills or go look at IBT. I feel like an infomercial, you know? And we're not trying to be an infomercial. It's just that it took us, I don't know, maybe 10 years to write all of the lessons that are involved in social cognition or theory of mind. And honestly, when we started writing these lessons, a lot of people were saying you cannot teach perspective taking. And we were like, oh, yes, you can. This is how you do it. And we published on that over and over, showing that kids did learn how to take someone else's, you know, the famous lesson where you blindfold the child and you have them take you from one location to another. It really gives the child a lot of perspective. But at the same time, you have to do it in a certain order, and if you don't do it in that order, it can be a little bit tough on the child. Because they suddenly become aware of everyone, and now they're become very self-conscious about, like, what are people thinking about me? And that's not really the purpose of this.
Yeah, and just so that people know, because if we just hear them saying, oh, we blindfold the child, they'll be like, what?
No, you blindfold the therapist, actually, and the child tells the therapist where to go.
And it's a game.
It's a game.
The kids love it. It's, you know, I think it's called Treasure Hunt.
Yeah, or this one is just blindfold task.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of times, well, what I've seen them do, they'll hide something.
Something, yeah.
The child gets to hide it somewhere, and then
Right.
the therapist is across the room, and they're blindfolded and they can't see.
Right.
And it's like they play this game on Survivor sometimes, right? On the show Survivor, and the child gets to stand up on something high that they're safe, but that they can see the room, and they make an obstacle course.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they try to guide the therapist through the obstacle course to get to the treasure.
Exactly.
The kids love it, and it helps them to learn, oh, you can't see that.
That's right.
Or, oh, if I tell you, if the kids are older and they go to the left, but it's the other person's left.
Yeah.
Like it really puts it
Yeah.
in practice in a very fun way where they go, oh, why aren't you doing that?
Well, I mean, a lot of times, as you know, our kids will say things like, and even though you're blindfolded, they'll be like, go there.
Right,
Right?
right.
And it's the type of thing that, and also they do that on the phone, obviously, right?
Yes.
Which also is the same scenario.
Yes.
And when they do it in this particular thing, they suddenly realize, oh, wait a minute, the person can't see where there
Yeah,
is,
it really
so I have
brings
to
it home.
describe it. Exactly.
It really brings it home. Okay, I don't know why that isn't working for me. But in the midst of all this, people have written in and said, well, wait a second, how do I access the skills lesson?
Okay.
And then we have another person who's written on Facebook saying, I had skills, but I ended up not being able to afford it.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody else who's saying, I would like skills in my school.
Really?
And what should I do? So, but it's all a little bit of how do I access it and the money for it and how
Yeah.
can I get it cheaper? And there's lots of information about that. Do you want to start with that?
Well, I do want to talk about that a little bit because my impression was that skills is actually pretty affordable. I think it was somewhere, I can't quote how much it is now because it used to be something like $65 a month, I think, or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
Do you
think it's a
remember?
little closer to $75 a month, but there is an Autism Live discount.
Oh, great.
So you should ask for that. I'm not sure what that is at the moment, but there
Okay.
is an Autism Live discount. So
Okay.
definitely tell them you watched on Autism Live. You want the Shannon Penrod Friends and Family discount.
Got it.
They'll call me up. We'll have a conversation about it because I know that there's some new things happening over there. But there's also, you can apply for a grant for it.
You could definitely apply for a grant for it, and I might even, now that I have time to kind of run ACT a little bit more actively, and ACT is Autism Care Today, which is our non-profit that I formed 15 years ago, I think. And it really just gives grants to families. Now, we had shut it down because or not shut it down, we had stopped the grant cycle just because we were trying to catch up with fundraising. But
It was like a pause.
It was a pause. And excuse me, we're about to open the grant cycle again, which I'm very excited about. And so if there's a lot of requests for skills, that's a really awesome thing that I would love to fund. And so I'll have to, maybe you and I can talk about that later, because I really want to start some individual initiatives so that when people apply, they apply specifically for that, and it just goes faster.
Because it is a small amount, but sometimes, I'm just going to be honest, when we were in the thick of autism intervention, it would have been outside my price range.
Exactly. It's like everything adds up.
Right? Because you have so many other things you have to pay for. So, if you're writing in about skills and you're wanting grants, write to me specifically, s.penrod@autism-live.com, so I can help you to navigate that. But for those of you who want to just go to skills because you want to look at it, skillsforautism.com. You can request to have someone to take you on a walkthrough of it. I'm also happy to do that for parents because sometimes, that's deeply exciting to me. I'm Skills' biggest fan too.
Yeah, Skills is
I love Skills. Skills has done so much for me as a parent, and I love showing different things to parents. But I always say it's like a mall. It's a big mall. You don't have to go into every store. I just ask people before we go in, what is it you want this to do?
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you there's a store in this mall that will do the thing that you want to do, but let's not shop all of it on the same day.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because a couple days ago I was meeting with the executive director for Skills, Andre, and we were talking about how do we simplify it. we're really focused
I
on
met
trying
him.
to do
He's
that.
pretty fabulous. I
He is.
liked him.
He's great.
And so I can't wait to talk to him about these kinds of things for you guys, so that we can, make sure that the Shannon Penrod Friends and Family discount stays at Skills.
Yes.
I think I'm optimistic about that. But also, some of you have asked about Skills and IBT and having it in your school. And the pricing for Skills for schools is vastly different. Because it's buying a series of contracts, and you can customize it. Lots of schools have been able to do it. I would say, if that's what you want to do, just call over there. There's a phone number if you go to Skills for Autism. Just call over there, tell them what you want to do, and they will give you a quote. Sometimes they're, like, in different states, there's different things that allow them to do different things.
Yeah, or you can even just call them and tell them your school's information, and one of the folks at Skills will then contact your school and try to get a contract going with your school.
In fact, somebody just wrote it in and said, "Hi, I'm a BCBA and use the book Evidence-Based Treatment, the CARD
good.
model." They say, "I find this so beneficial. I especially love the appendixes in the
that's Skills. That's Skills.
in the back with the breakdown of goals. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge by writing this book. I would love to purchase Skills as well for my clients, but the cost is quite prohibitive, being that I have 10 clients. But when you're buying at a different amount, and they're wanting to know if there's any promotions, just call over, tell them that what you want to do, what you're doing. They do it at they do it for schools, they do it for ABA providers. It functions differently than if you're buying it for your child, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's, you need to be able to go back and forth
That's
between
right.
children.
You would not be paying $75 for each of your children. They would give you some sort of deal.
Yeah. So just call over to them. Tell them that you heard it from Dr. Granpeesheh and Shannon on Autism
Absolutely.
Live.
And I'm really thrilled when I hear that BCBAs like Skills and are using Skills. I love that. I got to tell you, as a fellow BCBA, you'll love the reporting aspects of it. It's my favorite thing about Skills is how it generates data for you and how it can just produce the graphs that you need for your patients.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's a huge mall, and there's lots of different stores in the mall.
Yeah.
But from one of my favorite stores in the mall is the BIP Builder. Oh my goodness, because there's so much room for error, and especially as a parent, the first time I ever looked at a BIP, I was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? And they would hand me a BIP. There was one time where we took, I'm not kidding you, 4 meetings with no less than 12 people in the room to write a BIP. Right? And it took months. And meanwhile, my son was engaging in the behavior and nobody knew what to do. And so
Right.
everybody was doing something different.
Right.
But then the BIP Builder came online, and I've told this story before, so forgive me if you've heard it. But they handed me a BIP for my child and said, well, this is the BIP from last year. And I don't know how to read it. And I consider myself a fairly intelligent person and deeply curious, right? But I sat down with the BIP and I opened the BIP Builder and I started comparing. And I was like, oh, it says here the function of the behavior is attention. So I drop down menu over here and I plug that in. I'm just going to compare. And then it says here what the antecedent is, and I go to put that in, and the little system went, warning, this has not been found to be effective. And I was like, what? And then, of course, then I start to see the whole thing. The antecedent that they had put in did not match, and then when I got to the consequence was somebody was going to talk to him about it.
Yeah.
Which is feeding the behavior.
Yeah.
So I went back into the IEP and I said, hi, your BIP right here where you have this is not a scientifically based, evidence-based thing. I would
They
rather
must
that
have
you do
loved
this.
you.
And they went, we don't need to look at that paper. We'll and then suddenly I had a different person at the meeting. It was like that just suddenly disappeared from, we don't need to, right? And then he had a BIP that, hey, guess what? It worked. And then the behavior went away.
Yeah.
And we were and you know what the behavior was for? Every time there was a writing task, he was in avoidance.
Oh, gosh.
Right? And so he would do everything. And now I have a son who is getting ready to apply to colleges for what? screenwriting.
Wow, it's amazing.
Because the behavior got
Amazing.
dealt with
Honestly,
appropriately,
yeah.
and that's why you need a good BIP.
That's amazing.
Right? And how about the opposite side of that when we hear about people, the teacher who didn't have a well-written BIP and didn't understand it,
Right.
and so she zipped her child into a bag, a duffel bag
God.
that
Oh
was
my
meant
God.
for
Don't tell me
tennis
this.
balls. Right? And that's how the mom, and then they called mom and said, you have to come get him. He's engaging in behavior.
Oh my
She
God.
got to the principal's office and said, where's my child? And they unzipped the bag. He was in the bag. Lawsuit, let me just tell you. But that's what happens when you don't have a decent BIP. So we don't want that. It's one of the rooms and skills. You may never go into that
Yeah.
room, but I love that. That's my store.
It's a really good place, and I have to credit Dr. Jonathan Tarbox for working a lot on that and really perfecting kind of the CIFA, which is the indirect functional assessment, which is the basis for a VIP builder, is identifying what the function, the behavior is. And he did an amazing job with that, truly
Isn't that
did.
wonderful?
Yep.
So many talented minds worked on skills
Absolutely, absolutely right.
and on IBT. It's just sort of amazing. Okay, we didn't take a break. How crazy
Okay.
am I? I just keep making you talk. We're going to take a break. Keep writing in your stuff. We're loving hearing from you guys live. We'll be back after these messages.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bure,
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
and you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
Life-threatening aspects of autism. Unfortunately, autism can be a life-threatening condition. There are things that are associated with it that parents need to know about. First of all, there's the risk of seizure. It's heightened in people with autism. There's also the risk of what they call elopement, which means basically running away. Elopement can lead to things like exposure, drowning if they get near bodies of water, and maybe being hit by cars. Being hit by cars is certainly something that seems to be emerging as a problem in people with autism. So what do? We have to take certain steps to keep them safe to start. That means at home. Let's look around the home first. Where are your points of entry? Barriers, doors, windows, access to bodies of water, gates, fences. You have to look at school because people with autism can sometimes elope from school or things like that, daycare. So you have to make sure that it is written into their plan, wherever they are, that people are going to be responsible. That may include a tracking device. For some people with autism or Asperger's, a tracking device might be useful. It might help people know where they are, so in case someone has taken them a place that they shouldn't be taken, kind of trick them. Sometimes you get that happening with your teenagers, or they're just a child that's unable to communicate or speak very well and you need to know where they are. Consider that. There's a new generation of tracking devices. It can go in their shoe, can go in their jean, maybe in a cell phone. And I would also add that one of the most life-threatening aspects of autism is sadly being bullied, socially excluded, things like that. That's always happening in people with autism spectrum disorder. People bully them, exclude them. The risk of suicide is unfortunately very high. So do not be afraid to probe, ask uncomfortable questions, see what's happening. Even if they don't tell you, you need to ask other people at school what they know, what they've seen. Even though it's an uncomfortable thing, we do need to be aware that this is a very dangerous situation at times. Be very, very vigilant. Stay upbeat, be positive, and realize no one person and no one family can keep a child with autism safe all by themselves. Get the support you need, look around, be vigilant. It's better to take steps you feel that you don't need too soon than too late.
Welcome back to Autism Live. So last week we addressed a question, and we had somebody who just wrote in, and I want to say first of all hello, and I want to tell you that we answered a question written by your family last week, and I didn't have a chance to call you and tell you, but Mom writes in this week and says, thank you for everything you do for all of us. I have a question. My son is 12, has Down syndrome and ASD, L2 verbal bilingual. He has troubles with transition. He started middle school in August. He has not yet adjusted to the schedule at school, lunches at different times, classes change as well. What are your recommendations for us and for school?
Okay, sure. What was his age again?
So, 12.
12. And he's in middle school.
Middle school, just started middle school.
And they're basically saying level 2.
Yes.
And he's bilingual.
I don't know whether it's, but she has it verbal B-Y lingual. So I don't know if that's really bilingual or
Okay.
or
So he's
or
verbal.
verbal
Okay. And
bilingual. I don't know.
And he's middle school, and what is the problem? Is transitions?
So the whole middle school thing has been hard, but
Yes,
in
middle school is
particular,
very
the
difficult.
fact that the schedule, that lunch isn't at the same time, and that
The whole thing with
classes
middle
aren't
school.
at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I don't know, why do they walk out of their way to make it harder?
So it's interesting because we very specifically, I remember when a lot, years and years ago, again, we go back to skills, but there was a phase where I noticed a lot of my younger kids hitting middle school and having these types of issues. And it really it's very focused on the scheduling of events, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit. So what we did is we actually put a whole section of skills in which had to do with transitions that are very specific to middle school. I'm trying to remember the name of the lessons that we wrote, but what we were encountering, and I'm wondering if it's the same thing for your child, was that a lot of the kids would have a very difficult time because middle school is when the schedules that you're given are not very direct. So for instance, you'll go to a class, and first of all, there's a lot of change. You're now moving around. A lot of times in elementary school, you're in one classroom. Middle school, you're the one getting your stuff and going from one class to another. Your teacher changes.
Yeah.
The group of kids that you're with change. So the direction you go, you can no longer follow people around. You kind of have to find your own schedule and your path. And then the worst part of it, I remember, was that a lot of our kids would have a hard time because they would assign you homework which wasn't due tomorrow. It was due in 3 days or 4 days or day after tomorrow or whatever, and our kids just had a really, really hard time organizing themselves.
Yeah.
And so we realized that this has a lot to do with just organization, and we wrote a whole series of lessons having to do with task organization, and it is in skills. And it really has, it's funny to say this, but the best thing you could do is buy your child one of those old, what did we call those? Planners, exactly, and really teach your child how to use a planner. Now, if you want, you can also do that on an iPhone or something, but it's all about using a planner so that everything that is, I had to literally do this with all of my kids when they entered. This is good for all kids, not just our kids on the spectrum. But teaching them to actually, when you receive an assignment, to actually consider that something that you have to do that night, for example. When you're going from one activity to the next, like, in other words, you mentioned your child's issue is transitioning, and transitioning, you just get better at as you keep doing it. It's a thing that you'll just start to get much better at as you practice it. But it does have a lot to do with anxiety. And generally speaking, if you don't know what you're transitioning into, you're going to tend to have a harder time going to the next activity. And particularly if the activity you're in right now is somewhat enjoyable or safe or familiar, you're going to have a very hard time going into another activity. So like everything that Shannon and I often talk about this, if you want to teach a specific skill, you focus on that skill and you work it not when it's happening in real life, but you know, as a lesson, you specifically pick a particular amount of time and you focus on that. Just like if we want to, I don't know, physically get in shape, we pick an hour and go work out. Like you have
Is that
to
what
have
we do? I'm not sure. I don't know about that. I don't know that lesson. But yes, I hear that.
But this is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So you have to pick a certain amount of time and focus on transitioning your child from preferred to unpreferred activities. And the way that you do it is they're in a preferred activity. Well, first of all, what you should start out with is just going from a neutral activity to a neutral activity. So two things that are approximately the same level of reinforcement, you have your child discontinue. So there's so many aspects of transitioning. Sometimes our kids just want to gain closure. That's again an anxiety thing. They want to finish an activity before they can let it go. A lot of us are like that. But the first task is to interrupt your child in the middle of an activity and have them just leave it alone, right? And then some time goes by, reward them for being able to do that. The next phase is to go from a neutral to a neutral activity. And again, as soon as they move, you give them a reinforcer in the new neutral activity. Next is to go from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity or just a neutral activity. And again, you prompt them, you model for them, you coach them, you take them to the next activity, you reward the second activity. And as you continue to do this, then you mock produce situations that are more and more similar to what the child's going through in middle school. And the main thing to remember is that whatever activity they're going to, the second activity, that's the harder transition, the child needs to have some sort of, I guess, reward or something that is, let's say, gives them a sense of security and safety. It could be as simple as a picture on the wall of the second classroom, right? So like work it out with the school. If you know that your child's having a significantly hard time going from this class to another class, make sure the second class has something on the wall that your child can anchor themselves to when they go to the class. Make sure the second teacher knows to check on them when they enter the class. And just little things like that will make a huge difference for your child.
Absolutely. It's funny because we have parents at CARD that are just so confused by the schedule. And I was just having a conversation with a parent about this the other night. And because it changes. Every day is different and every week is different.
Yes.
So you have an A week and you have a B week and they are different than each other. And sometimes you have an A1 week and you have a B2 week. And people say these words to me now after we did 5 years of ABA therapy, and I break out into a little bit of hives.
Right.
But what CARD did was created an app. And what it did was created a visual schedule for parents where every day they just, like you would for anything else, you go to the day and it tells you what you have.
Right.
And sometimes we forget, like when our kids were little, we make visual schedules. And so with the planner, what you're doing is making a visual schedule for him.
That's exactly right.
And so that he can look at it and go, what do I have today? Executives here do that. They look and they go, what do I have on my agenda today? And if you turn off their planner, they lose their mind. They don't know where they're going. There's no way you can keep track of. So whether it's that you write it in or right before Jem went to junior high, and there was wonky schedule where it was periods 1 through 9 for Monday, and then on Tuesday we start periods 2, and then 9 goes to the end. And I was like, he's never going to be able to get that. I'm never going to be able to understand it. Like the world was going to burn down. I was so afraid. And you know what somebody showed me?
And then some days they suddenly throw in something like 0 schedule.
Yes. Because we have an assembly or whatever, right? And just when you think you have it, right? But somebody explained it to me. Jem had it already because he could do it in his head. But how they explained it to me was they took a bunch of index cards and made me a visual schedule and said, this is Monday. And then they went, now look, this is Tuesday. And they just moved the card from here to there.
Exactly.
And once I saw that, I was like, oh, I get it now.
Exactly.
But you can do that for him, whatever the wonky schedule is.
Yes.
And you can do it with cards. Or you can just write it into his schedule, depending on what kind of event. But I think you'll see that when we have a visual schedule and we know what's happening, we have less anxiety.
100%, and practice it. This is the thing. On the weekend, practice it with him and say, okay, where are you going now? What are you doing now? You know, that sort of thing. I mean, actually, you could go to the school and practice it.
Yes.
It really just has to do with what are the things that are causing anxiety and reducing those things or giving the child something else that'll help them feel more safe. and then they'll
Absolutely.
be able to manage it.
And then your life gets better because then he's a happy camper at school.
Because, yeah, absolutely. Because just like us, all of our kids are, they don't want to do something wrong. They don't want to get lost. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to go to unfamiliar activities where they might fail. I mean, I remember, like, my kids, typically developing kids, would have an issue with going to PE, for example, because they're not very athletic, right? So those types of things, it's just, see things from your child's perspective, and it'll become very easy to plan.
Absolutely. Okay, so somebody's written in on Facebook and said, what are the major differences with developmental delays due to extreme prematurity versus autism? My son has been diagnosed with different agencies: regional center, developmental doctor, school district, and the diagnoses are not even similar. So obviously her son was born premature and somebody's diagnosed autism. What's the difference?
Yeah. Isn't that annoying when you're just trying to seek a clarification on what's going on with your child? So the way that I look at the diagnosis of autism, and perhaps that's because I've been in the field for 40 years, so you see a lot of change in the classification of the diagnosis. When I first started in the field back in the 70s, we had a whole different series of things we were looking for. Like, one of the symptoms of autism back then, and I think it was either the second or the third diagnostic manual, was something like the child is insensitive to pain. I mean, like, things that we don't even look at anymore right now. So when the diagnostic criteria, when the symptoms change all that often, like they've changed 4 times in the period of time I've been involved, it tells you that the symptoms are not diagnostic, they're descriptive. So they're not, if your child has these symptoms, he must have autism. It's more like most kids with autism have these symptoms. So I wouldn't be too focused on the diagnosis. I always tell parents, the diagnosis is useful because you will get funding. That is the only use of the diagnosis. All children on the spectrum have a different set of symptoms. There are some commonalities, but one child will have one symptom that another child won't have, and they both will be under the umbrella of ASD. So what I really suggest, and to answer your question more specifically, yes, there will be some similarities from premature babies who will have certain types of behaviors that are very similar to autism. The way that the diagnosis of autism works, though, is that you have to have a specific number of symptoms within certain areas. So in the social communication area, you need to have X number of symptoms. In the repetitive behaviors, you need to have X number of symptoms. So it becomes really important that you sort of, fit that criteria. But yeah, they could be very similar. With a premature baby, you probably have some of the symptoms, not necessarily all that will lead to a specific diagnosis of autism. For example, you might have 2 symptoms where 3 are required, that kind of thing. But having said all that, don't even worry about it. If you have a diagnosis of autism, get your funding and get your intervention, get your ABA going. And if you have a diagnosis of just prematurity or developmental delay or something like that, try to get help. You will have less access to funding without a diagnosis of autism, just because your situation will be less severe. But having said that, get ABA, because it's all about teaching those skills. It doesn't matter what, as I've always said, Shannon, the way you look at autism or any other disorder. It's like we're looking at ADHD this way, we're looking at global delay, developmental delay, intellectual delay, any kind of delay. What you do is you list all the things that are like delayed in contrast to peers, and all the things that are excessive in contrast to peers, and you balance them. You teach the child using ABA techniques how to do less of these things. For example, less screaming, less tantruming, less aggression, and less self-stimulatory behavior, and more of these things. For example, more social, more conversation, more language, more play, etc. And you try to bring the child within what we classify as kind of the normal realm of all behaviors for that age. and that's it. And that is your goal. So whatever the diagnosis, your goal should be to increase functional behaviors and decrease challenging behaviors, and that's it.
Yeah. I think as parents, we get all hung up on the diagnosis, right?
Yes.
And it's like the thing that we hang everything on. But I'm here to tell you that the diagnosis shouldn't define our child or their progress or where we expect them to be.
Right.
What as parents, what's useful is if we take the diagnosis to define where we're going to go to get funding to help our child get what they need.
Exactly.
And that's it. And then everything else you just sort of shove into a back closet and you go, not dealing with that. Because it's like all the stuff that's not useful to you.
Right.
If having the diagnosis gets you the therapy that you need to help your child to be able to do the things that they want to do, it's like that's enough.
Right.
Right? But everybody else will try to bring their, well, what's the diagnosis? Don't you find, I have many friends, unfortunately, that are going through cancer right now, and everybody wants to know, well, what stage, and they will all say, that's not helpful or useful to me right now. This is what I'm doing for treatment. I wish as an autism community we would gather around that too, because it's the same thing. No, okay, your level, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Let's treat you. You're an individual. You're here, and you need to learn some skills to cope, and you need to learn some skills so that you don't have to throw a tantrum. Let's just do that.
That's right.
Let's just do that,
right.
and not worry about everybody else's mishigas, as my friend
Right,
says.
honestly.
Right? Like, just move that to the back of the bus. Okay, now since we've been talking about middle school and high school, somebody wrote in and said, my child going to middle school is also my fear. I don't see that he will be able to be successful there because of all the transitions. Elementary school seems barely doable in public school. What will happen if my child is unable to adapt to a public middle school? Are there options besides homeschool? And they write in that they're in Glendale. And I think that we probably both have things to...
You have a million options. You have a million options. And being in California helps, of course. You start with requesting an IEP, Individualized Education Plan, and you can get an aid for your classroom. You can get an aid for your child specifically. You can get a resource specialist who can come in and try to help figure out how to make the schedule easier for your child. You can get accommodations from the school so that they make the plan, the homework, the schedule, whatever it is your child needs easier. There's a lot of things. You have a lot of options. But I wouldn't worry about that just yet. I would just maybe spend the summer practicing. Honestly, if you have the opportunity to go to the middle school with your child and talk to the teachers ahead of the school year and figure out exactly what it is that they are expecting from your child in detail, then I would work with someone to plan it and practice it.
Yeah, and you can have aides do all kinds of things.
Yes.
When my son was in middle school, his aid was for executive functions. That's what the aid was for. And so they helped him at school to set up his planner, work through his planner, notice what was in his planner, hand in the thing that was in his planner. There's all kinds of things, and it's individual. So, you can find the way to do it. It's just a matter of getting the school to be on board with that, and that's a whole Bonnie Yates conversation. But there's ultimate things that you can do. I'm so excited because you're going to love this next question.
Okay.
This is the first time. I wish that we had buzzers and things. You know how they have that, you're the 1 millionth customer.
Yeah.
This is the first time that somebody has written in with this, and we always see this. They write in, I'm confused about the levels of autism. Most people say my child is level 1 or level 2, but my child has 2 levels.
Oh, good.
Level 1 for social communication
There
and
you
level 2 for repetitive and restrictive behaviors. Why are there 2 levels? Congratulations, because you're the first parent who's
get it
written
right.
in and said, I have the 2 levels, because that is correct.
That is correct. So a couple of years ago, actually I don't remember what year it was now when they changed into the DSM-5. It's like 5. Yeah. That would make it 7 years ago already. Good
It's been a while.
Lord, Shannon.
It's been a while. We're due for another change,
Yeah, they
Okay.
changed every few years. So 7 years ago, they came out with the Diagnostic Manual 5, which basically said, okay, autism. Before that, we used to have like different types of autism, like autistic disorder, and then there was Asperger's disorder, and then there was PDD-NOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, and so on. And With the DSM-5, they said, no, this is all just one spectrum with different levels. And the other thing they did is they in the old days, 7 years ago, there used to be 3 categories of symptoms. One was communication, one was social behavior, and one was this stereotypical repetitive behaviors, which are very, very classically aligned with autism. And what they did with the DSM-5 is they merged the social and the communication, and it makes sense because if you think about it, you know, not having communication, not being able to communicate will delay social. And so those two are somewhat related to each other. So now we have 2 domains, the social communication and then the repetitive behaviors. And there are levels, there are 3 levels for each of those. So for example, in level 1 through 3. And the levels have to do with the amount of assistance or support your child needs. If your child needs very little support to deal with the social communication issues, then it's a level 1. If your child needs a moderate amount of support in that area, it's a 2. If your child needs a lot of support in that area, it's a 3. And if your child requires a little bit of support with their repetitive behaviors or sensory repetitive behaviors, it's a 1, again a 2 and a 3. But there are 2 domains, 2 distinct areas, social communication and the presence of repetitive stereotypical behaviors. And each of those will have a number. And I've said that multiple times. In fact, when you diagnose, you're not even supposed to mention the number. You're supposed to say with, you know, needing excessive support or needing minimal support or that sort of thing. But whatever it is, a number for each domain. So for your child, you got it right. Whoever diagnosed your child did it the right way. A lot of times people just give one number, and that is not necessarily accurate because one child might require a lot of support in social communication, but no support at all in the area of repetitive stereotypical behaviors, or the other way around.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, I certainly know people that would have been under the old Asperger,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And they are very communicative, probably would get a 1 under communication, but they are debilitated by
Some
Oh,
strict
rep-
routine
yes.
that they must.
and that even
Yeah.
leaving the house is a nightmare. And people go, well, look how
Yeah.
functional they are. And they're sitting there saying, I've got a real issue here.
That's right.
And so this reporting system has actually been helpful for them to be able to get support
That's right.
because identifies
Absolutely
them
right.
in different ways. But
Right.
congratulations on being the first person ever to write in.
That's right.
And you know, and of course we always think that we must have it wrong, but you actually had it right.
Thank
So fabulous. I want to address this because we only have a minute and a half here, but
Yeah,
my
I need to be upstairs exactly.
maybe we
you
should
know.
stop then. Let's stop.
So sorry
No,
about
no,
that.
it's okay, because I am always trying to push the limits. And I'm supposed to tell you what's going on the rest of the week. So, tomorrow on the show, we have Lillian Carrier with us. She plays Drea on the new hit show, Everything is Gonna Be Okay. I talked to you guys about this last fall when they debuted it at the Autfest. Oh my gosh, this show is so hilarious. You have to watch this.
Oh,
This
good.
is Josh Thomas. He is an Australian comic he wrote this show and he stars in it. He's hilarious. He is playing the gay half-brother from Australia who has to come and gets custody of his 2 sisters, his 2 half-sisters, one of whom who's on the spectrum.
Okay.
And Lillian plays one of the best friends of the girl who's on the spectrum. Lillian plays a character on the spectrum, is on the spectrum herself. She went to the audition with her service dog. They cast her and the service dog. So the
Awesome.
service dog is on the show as well. She's going to be here tomorrow with the service dog.
Oh, wonderful.
Isn't that wonderful? We're going to have a
Wonderful.
dog in the studio, which is mayhem always, but we love it, love it, love it. And I love that show. It's hysterical. It's out there. Like
That's
it is,
great.
it is
That's
out there,
great.
but it is hilariously funny. And then on Friday, Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We're playing a best of episode for you guys to check out. Make sure that you are here next week because let me just tell you, we have got stuff that's heating up until we get to April, and then we have just incredible, incredible guests. So we're out of time, but thank you so much for being here.
pleasure.
Thank you for being here. We'll be back tomorrow. You don't want to miss it. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.